Hello and welcome to another week, another episode of the Fantasy Game Plan. I guess it's more of a hangout than a podcast now, but it started as a podcast, and that's what I've always called it. So, the Fantasy Game Plan podcast hangout with me, Leo Howell, and with Matt Harmon. Matt, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good, Leo. Happy to be here talking to you again this week. Always fun, always great for us to passive aggressive at each other back and forth about fantasy football.
We've been pretty good. We've been pretty good lately, but
we have. We probably should dial up the heat a little bit.
yeah, need to get a little more of the animosity going. But yeah, we spent last week talking about daily fantasy football. Talked about on DraftKings in particular, and we kind of went through some of our thoughts and strategies on daily fantasy, and we talked about DraftKings in particular, and we made a lineup. That lineup did not cash. It didn't do well at all, actually.
Exactly how bad was it? Because I know we tweeted about it really briefly, but I don't.
Yeah, well, see.
Well, I know I picked Jordan Cameron.
Yeah,
that was
yes,
zero.
you did, but he was also on some of my other lineups, so
Yeah.
you weren't. It's not. We weren't alone there. Let me get it pulled up real quick. So it was actually one of my better lineups, which goes to show you how good of a week I had. We had Matthew Stafford, who had 18 points. We had Lamar Miller, who had 16 points. We went with Demarius, so we did get 40 points out of Demarius Thomas. No other player had more than 11 points. We had Jordan Cameron, who had his 1.5. We had Andre Holmes, who busted. We had Reggie Wayne, who busted.
Yeah.
Although really, it turned out to be hey, the Colts were passing successfully, so I got that part right. It's just that they didn't go to Reggie Wayne. So.
Right. There was another, I think, in another GPP lineup I had on FanDuel, actually, where I put Reggie Wayne in just because I was slightly convinced by what you said on our show. And I remember looking back on it Sunday, I was like, why did I listen to put in an old player?
So we finished 38 points out of the money in that GPP. So, but like I said, that was one of my better lineups. It was a rough day because a lot of Justin Forsett, and he didn't deliver. A lot of Andre Holmes, he didn't deliver. A lot of Jordan Cameron. But there were really no good tight ends. Unless you went off the board and took Owen Daniels, you were kind of hurting at tight end. Or did Julius wind up scoring?
No, he had 7 points or something.
Yeah,
It was
so there were no good options.
Gavin Escobar was the star of the week.
Yeah. Which I, first Number Fire plug of the week, I actually just wrote an article about him that should be going up soon at numberfire.com. So be sure to check that out. He was one of my favorite players coming out of college. I really liked me some Gavin Escobar coming out of San Diego State. I don't know. Did you have positive thoughts about him? Did you really pay attention to him at all?
No, I don't have any really strong feelings about him. I mean, I've heard conflicting reports. Some people really like him. Others say he's a soft player. But I mean, he's definitely just talking about right now. He does. I think he's got a nice opportunity if he can sustain, because I think Jason Witten is on the other side of over the hill.
Yeah, I'm there with you. So this week we're going to talk more about daily fantasy, and I think that the first thing we're going to do is we're going to break down what went wrong with our lineup. And we're going to talk about something that I thought of after the show that we didn't do in our lineup, and that I typically do, and that people should really do, particularly in GPPs. And that's the idea of stacking a quarterback with one of his pass catchers. Had we done that, and maybe used Golden Tate instead of Andre Holmes, we would have cashed, because obviously Golden Tate had a big day, and that would have overcome all the other issues that we had on our team. Maybe change the players that we picked. I don't think Holmes and Tate were the same price. They were close, but
we wouldn't have spent. I know we ended up last minute spending up on the defense. We probably could have gone the other way on that.
Yeah, and we went with the Vikings defense, which still would have been fine because Buffalo only scored 17 points. So
Right.
I don't know if they got any turnovers or anything, but actually I think they did. Orton threw, right?
I think that sounds about right. It
I
sounds
don't
about
know.
right for Kyle Orton.
Yeah, it's Kyle Orton. He probably did. So yeah, we obviously made a mistake there. That's something that in nearly every lineup you should almost always try to stack, particularly in tournaments, because the idea of stacking, and that you'll hear that phrase a lot, in any daily fantasy sport. In baseball, you'll hear people say stacking, and that is in baseball it's useful because if a guy gets an RBI, another guy on that team scores a run on that same play, and if you have both of those guys, you get double the points. The same is true in football. If you have a quarterback and a wide receiver, and you stack them, if you last year on one of my best weeks, I had Josh McCown and Alshon Jeffrey, and so every time the one threw to the other, I got points for both, and that's a really good way to, if you feel like there's a matchup that you can really exploit, that you stick with that and kind of double up on it, and it's you'll find it a lot. Actually, I'll just really quickly go to the team that won this GPP that we were in, and lo and behold, that person stacked their quarterback and wide receiver. Actually, Matt, I'll just put you on the spot here. I'll let you guess. What quarterback and wide receiver did this guy stack to win this GPP?
How about Aaron Rodgers and Randall Cobb?
No, that's a good guess. No, but this is a stack that I faded for some reason, and I don't know why. Because I love both of these players, but I faded this stack for some reason and didn't do it. Stacked Russell Wilson and Doug Baldwin. And that was 71 points between the two of them. So nearly outscored our entire lineup with his QB wide receiver stack. Also went with Owen Daniels, had Matt Forte, Golden Tate, Le'Veon Bell. So pretty much nailed all the picks, except for had Jonathan Stewart in there, but he got 7 points at like nearly minimum salary. So
yeah, you can't really. I had him in another lineup too, and you can't really get too angry when you at least 7 points.
You brought that upon yourself by rostering him. Yeah, so that's just basically in any sort of tournament setting. Stacking unlocks the possibility of getting the biggest score possible, really, because you're saying, I think that this quarterback is going to score the most points this week, or the most points per dollar, basically. And by stacking, you're saying, I really believe that to the point where I think that his wide receiver will also do well. So that is definitely a move that we neglected when we made our lineup, and we paid for it. We didn't get. We missed out on 34 points of Golden Tates because we didn't pick the obvious stack. Like, that was the most obvious stack of the week. We didn't know who Russell Wilson was going to throw to. We could have figured Doug Baldwin, like he was the target leader without Harvin there, but everyone knew it was Golden Tate. Like, that was such an easy pick, and we both neglected it. So, and that's another thing that is worth mentioning is we talked about last week how trying to be contrarian isn't always good, just to be contrarian for contrarian's sake. That sometimes it's about just getting the best players, and that was especially true with the team that won the Millionaire Maker. Russell Wilson, Sammy Watkins, and Roddy White were the only players owned on less than 10% of teams in the Millionaire Maker on that roster. All the other players on that roster were owned on 10% or more of the teams in the contest. So that means at least 7,000 people picked those players also. But it's just getting the right combinations and getting the right values and just hitting on a couple of players. And nobody was less than 5%. Like, they weren't finding some super off-the-board play. Like, Sammy Watkins was the most sleeper pick that he made. And that, I had Sammy Watkins in a couple places and I don't like him. So it's not always about finding these, and also he didn't stack, which, like I said, is not an essential thing, and in this case it worked, but it is an easy way to kind of unlock some big points. But what are your thoughts on either our lineup or on stacking or on any kind of reactions to our failure in daily fantasy this past weekend?
Well, I was nodding my head along with you when you mentioned the stacking thing because I thought about that and was like, I was a little surprised we didn't do that, and that's probably from just the back and forth nature as we were both picking. It was just something that we must have missed, and I should have considered that when you picked Stafford to go with Tate. But yeah, I generally have really bought into that a lot more lately, especially, I mean, if you got a really good quarterback or even just any old quarterback in a good matchup that's going to throw the ball a lot, I like to go with the stack because, like you said, it's just kind of makes sense. They're going to be, congruent values and everything. This week I'm using a lot of, and I'm already jumping ahead here, but this week I'll probably use a lot of Kyle Orton and Sammy Watkins again. It's against the Jets defense. It's a good stack.
That means I'm going to have to pick my quarterback first when we make our lineup later to make sure that we don't wind up with Kyle Orton at the top.
Okay, well that's certainly fine. I mean, even though I was weary about Stafford last week when you picked him.
It turned out to be all right considering his price. So
and the fact he threw 2 interceptions too. I mean, he still got decent points.
Yeah, that's you kind of expect, like, Stafford's right there with like Carson Palmer, and that you just expect to lose a couple points from turnovers, but
yeah, like that's just going to happen. And the good thing about stacking too, to get back to that, is like usually if you pick the right combination, you're hardly ever going to get like 2 duds. I mean, I guess that's what people fear about it, but like the worst case scenario, like if you have.
Well, the worst case scenario is last week when like I took Derek Carr and Andre Holmes. Like that was
all right.
But that's a riskier stack. Like,
exactly. Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. Like I would probably never stack those 2 players, but I see your logic in that. But the funny thing to me is like I guess people are worried. Like, well, what if I do hear people say this. Well, why would I stack when what if my quarterback gets hurt? Then that takes my wide receiver down. But I'm like, if your quarterback gets hurt, your lineup is probably screwed anyway.
Yeah, especially in tournaments. Like if you're playing in cash games, then you can diversify. That's fine because you can overcome a quarterback getting hurt in a cash game. But yeah, if your quarterback gets hurt in a tournament, you're not gonna cash. It doesn't matter.
You're gonna lose that, $5 or $10 entry anyway. So I think you have to be ready to accept that. So stacking is definitely something that I go with, and I mean on a few of our, I don't really blame us too hard on a lot of our picks. I don't think we went egregiously wrong, and that's another thing that don't overreact to one failing. I mean, don't overreact to a lot of things in life or in fantasy football, but don't overreact to your failings in daily one week and then completely change your process next week, because I don't really think there was any, playing Jordan Cameron, I think there was, wisdom in that despite what happened.
20% of the people in our GVP did it, so.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, some of the other ones, we just didn't have anyone that went off. But I mean, Lamar Miller, like you said, Matt Stafford, they had pretty decent.
Well, we had Demaryius Thomas.
Exactly, but I mean, other than that,
could definitely qualify as going off. But
sure.
Let's start looking ahead at this week upcoming, and we'll start by answering a couple questions. We're going to do another lineup here at the end of the show on FanDuel this time, so it's a little different. We'll talk about the differences before we do that, but let's answer a couple questions and do some kind of position-by-position previews. The first question that I got comes in from Dennis on Twitter at Dennis Babenko, and he asks, for this week, I'm assuming, because he lists the opponents, Phillip Rivers versus Denver or Tom Brady versus the Bears. I will let you answer this first because my answer is pretty short and sweet and to the point.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Brady against the Bears, and maybe that's not what you were going to do. The Thursday games, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too scared off by Thursday games.
I think you are. I
Yeah,
think that you're getting scared away from a perfect game flow to take a quarterback who's already ridiculously efficient and put him into more volume.
yeah. Actually, I'm over here trying to avoid a sneezing fit, so maybe maybe I don't know what the hell I'm saying, but no,
Uh,
I think you're actually probably.
no, I mean
Uh,
Brady's not bad. Like
no.
the fade Brady part of the season is over. Like you
Like
know,
he's back to throwing, I mean, he threw 4 touchdowns against Buffalo. He threw 3 touchdowns against the Jets.
yeah,
And the Bears are not a scary matchup either, which is, I think that was my first instinct was that this isn't a bad matchup if you want to play Brady. I don't think it's necessarily so terrible. And if you are scared of Thursday games, but that's also you mentioned the fade Brady phase. I think Thursday games are starting to change too, where that they're not just all like. I guess in my head, I immediately heard Thursday game like, oh well, the Broncos are a better team. Like, but that's an antiquated view at this point of the season, probably. So,
I'm not even sure how much better the Broncos are than the
yeah.
Chargers. So
I mean, well, the Chargers did just lose to the Chiefs, and that's
yeah, but I mean the Broncos lost to the Seahawks, which actually looks like a worse loss at this point. So
right. I don't know. I mean, you're definitely right. I mean, they're not so much better.
yeah,
So
exactly. The point is that this should be a competitive game
yeah.
with one offense that is significantly better than the other defense, in the Broncos over the Chargers. So I can see a situation where the Chargers offense has to kind of open up a little bit, and that's what we need to get more fantasy production out of a guy like Rivers. That he's ridiculously efficient, but he's just not throwing as often as Andrew Luck or a Peyton Manning.
I
So
mean, what do you think about that Denver defense too, though? I mean, they're pretty good.
yeah, no, yeah, they're not bad. I
They're not
just
so bad that I'm gonna immediately say, oh, I'm not gonna play a quarterback against them. But they're
no, I think that the San Diego offense is almost matchup proof at this point, though.
they do have just so many different ways that they can attack you, and Vernon Davis is like broken pretty much, so he didn't show it last week. But Denver really can't cover tight ends, and their best linebacker, not Von Miller linebacker, but Danny Trevathan,
Yeah,
he's
their
still
best
out.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, so they can attack him with Gates and Green, even if they're getting pressured by Miller and Ware.
Plus Eddie Royal revenge game, even though he's already had a couple of those, I think. But
Narrative Street. I made a few jokes. I know we mentioned that last podcast. I made a few jokes that the property value on Narrative Street took a big hit last week, and it's like the riff raff teenagers.
Peyton delivered.
That's true. I was talking with TJ Hernandez about that. He said, "Well, if Peyton throws like one touchdown tonight, then I think you can officially say that the riff-raff teenagers have moved in down the street, and everybody, all the nice old folk are moving off this."
I feel like Brandon Marshall was really the only true narrative street this past week.
And even that, like, not to cut you off, but even that, I was thinking about that on Monday. I was like, do you think Brandon Marshall even cares about stinging it?
Well, apparently he did, because apparently that's why he got mad at everybody.
True, but like, I mean, if I was Brandon Marshall, I'd be like, thanks for dealing me, Miami. I don't know.
Well, at this point, he's pretty much a wash. He's on the average team either way. But anyway, to answer your question, Dennis, I would go with Phillip Rivers, but I think it's pretty I think it's pretty obvious to me, just because I just think that Rivers is so much safer. I do think that the floor for Brady is still lower. But I can totally see wanting to fade the Thursday night game. That is a legitimate thing. I think that is still something that you can make your decision based on that. I don't, and I wouldn't, but you can. So if that's what you choose to do, then you can do that. But we'll move on to another question, and this is kind of a season-long question, but it also can kind of pertain to the next couple of weeks as well. Jeff from RSCN and the Draft Report, both of our friends here on Twitter, tweeted which running back from the Rams is the one to own going forward. This one's also pretty easy for me, but I'll go ahead and let you answer first.
Well, I think it's Zach. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm not going to bungle this question too. No, I mean, I think it's Mason. I mean, it's definitely Mason. I mean, Stacy is about to get Zach Stacy, in a way, it looks like. And it's not even that I think Zach Stacy's like a bad player. I still think he's like a good football player. Like he's not like disgustingly incompetent out there. I just think Mason's better. He's more explosive. And is it possible that Jeff Fisher, pulls a troll attempt and somehow Benny Cunningham gets 20 carries next week? I think that's in the realm of possibility. But I mean, Mason looks like the guy. He looks like he's better than he was in college, and he's already like clearly the best physical specimen out of that backfield. And he's just naturally more gifted than these other guys, and if he learns a little bit in the passing game, that would be great. It's not something that he did a lot in college, so I definitely think it's Mason. I mean, all signs point that way.
Yeah, I'm with you in that I think it's Mason, just because you see the floor for Stacy, that he is clearly not valued enough to be force-fed any carries, that he's not a priority enough to be put on the field just because.
One sack last week, right? I mean,
yeah. Like, he's just not a guy that they're gonna put out there, and like really, like if you think about what they invested in him, like they don't have to. He's not. He was a 5th-round pick, and everybody fell in love with him instantly, and he was a fantasy football darling from the start. But it was just because he, was productive at a mediocre school, and but it's just a situation where the most talented player is Trey Mason. He's the most talented running back there, and the talent should win out. And like you said, Jeff Fisher, maybe not the most trustworthy coach. He's not quite on that Belichick or Shanahan level, but he's definitely, maybe not the most trustworthy head coach. But even still, yeah, like he's the most talented player, and they're going to keep trying to run the ball. They may not be the best team in the NFL, but they do, try to stick with the run. I believe that they're actually, let's see. They're right in the middle of the pack. They're like, 3 or 4 rushing plays a game away from being just an average run-to-pass ratio team. So, they're going to keep trying to run the ball, and Mason's going to be a big part of that. So,
yeah. And if the question is just who do I want to own, I mean, I want to own Mason because I think he has the most upside. Even if.
Yeah, because you're not going to start any of these guys. None of these guys are starters like this week, unless you have bye week issues. But in terms of long-term upside, yeah, he's the one who could be a starter 3 weeks from now.
Right. Exactly.
Unless somebody gets hurt, but we're not trying to predict that. So, I believe you said you have another question that got sent in to you.
Yeah, this one just got sent in to me while we were about to start the podcast. And I just thought it would be interesting for us to answer. Who's a better ad this way? And this comes in from at BLK627 on Twitter. That's Brendan, looks like. And he asked us, who's a better ad for this week, Dante Moncrief or Paul Richardson?
I'm assuming that's a pretty deep league if you're considering those guys, but which is great because that makes it more fun. Obviously, Reggie Wayne dealing with a slight injury and will be out for I think I saw 1 to 2 weeks. So that's obviously where Moncrief's value would theoretically come from. But I think that the better player and the guy in the better, it's tough to say better situation because neither one's really great. But the better situation for me is Paul Richardson. I think that he is capable of doing some of the catch and run things that they wanted to do with Harvin, and he's also, him and Curse are probably the 2 best down the field guys. They've been giving Ricardo Lockett those chances in the first few weeks, but he's a special teamer. Like, I feel like he was kind of pressed into duty on that because Richardson wasn't ready. Richardson's a very good deep ball receiver, and if Darrell Bevell does want to try to take the top off of a defense, he and Jermaine Kearse are the guys to do it. And I also feel like Richardson has some screen game possibilities and some catch and run possibilities. I mean, Moncrief's a capable guy. Like, don't get me wrong, but I just really feel like Richardson's the better player, and that maybe there's a role there that's not already filled for him, because I don't feel like Jermaine Kearse is really as good of an athlete as Richardson, and so I feel like if they really do want to try to go deep, Richardson may be their best option right now. Whereas with Moncrief, obviously T.Y. Hilton is a better option at pretty much whatever you want him to do than Moncrief at this point.
Yeah, I don't really have strong feelings about this either way. Like, neither one of them were like my draft babies or whatever,
Yeah, Richardson was a guy I really liked.
Yeah.
Which is weird because I'm a Colorado State fan, but.
But so let me disagree with you just for the sake of conversation and say Moncrief. And
I don't disagree. Let me say this, just to make this even muddier and less of a decision. If you only need a guy for a couple weeks, I agree, because I think while Wayne is out, his value's higher. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you love old football players. Like, I know
I do.
I know that is your thing. And the Fred Jackson injury has to just be earth shattering at this point. And Reggie Wayne being hurt too on the same week. I mean, the divine must really be angry with you right now. But anyways, so Reggie Wayne being hurt, and he looks pretty much toast to me at this point. Like, he does not look good. I mean, he looks like a 35-year-old or whatever, like trying to come back from an ACL injury. He hasn't looked good in this offense, and this unit is running really well right now with Andrew Luck. Obviously, T.Y. Hilton is soaking up targets. I kind of like Moncrief better in that offense than I like Richardson in Seattle's offense. Not that Seattle's a bad offense, but random little things happen there. Like, I mean, this tight end I've never heard of, Cody Harkey, is that it? Like, he scored last week.
Cody Harkey is one letter removed from the Eagles kicker Cody Parkey.
Like, that's not fair.
I think you're thinking of Connor Helfett, who's actually caught like 3 passes.
Did I just make up a name?
You kind of, like I said, you kind of just butchered the name of the Eagles kicker and assigned it to a Seahawks tight end.
Well, that just illustrates my point when I'm saying weird things happen.
I don't think that's weird, because Connor Helfett was the number 1 tight end because both Luke Wilson and Zach Miller were out. So
okay, just follow me down my wormhole real quick.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I just think that like that offense is going to do things like that, and Richardson might have some bigger weeks than Moncrief, but if Moncrief is about to, he seems more likely to step into a bigger role than Richardson is, just because, like I said, Wayne is hurt, Hakeem Nicks is done at this point too. I don't think there's as many obstacles to him, where I think Wilson obviously has rapport with Baldwin and Kearse and all those guys, and I don't know. So,
yeah,
like I said, it's not really I don't have any strong feelings about the side of Wayne.
Yeah, like I feel like you're kind of generating some stuff there at the end, because the Colts offense not only features Hilton, Wayne, and Nicks, but you've got Fleener and Allen to deal with.
And Bradshaw in the red zone. Yeah, I mean,
on the red zone. So
Richardson,
like they both don't have a clear path to being like every snap players or anything, but I think Moncrief, while Wayne is out, is the better week-to-week play. But for the rest of the season, I think that Richardson's a better player. But either way, like I said, you're digging deep here. So are there any other like deep play wide receivers that you can think of that if this guy is digging this deep at the wide receiver spot, that you would maybe look at instead? I think that Bryce Butler in Oakland is a guy that you could look at instead.
Yeah, that's not a bad one.
Just because he's got rapport with Carr and he actually plays. So
true. That is true, and he's a big play guy as well. And Carr did have that one quote where he said, not last week's big play, but the touchdown against San Diego, where he said, "Yeah, I had absolute faith in Butler to make that catch or whatever." And sure, I mean, what else is he going to say? But I think there's some validity to that, where he wasn't really prompted to say anything about Butler, and he did. So yeah, I think that Butler's a guy that's a pretty good call by you. But other than that, I'm struggling to to come up
Another
with
thing
things.
about Bryce Butler, just to keep adding on facts here for that, is that Oakland is the most pass-heavy team in the NFL so far this year. So the opportunities are definitely there. Other pass-heavy teams in another situation you could look for, if there's a Jacksonville receiver who's still out there,
Yeah.
that's another pass-heavy team that, I mean, Allen Robinson, I'm sure, is taken in the league where you're picking between Moncrief and Robinson, but Manziel Shorts too. So, Marquise Lee and Mike Brown, I think, are both. I think I'd rather have either of them than Richardson or Moncrief at this point.
Mike Brown?
Yeah,
Mm.
or Marquise Lee.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know about that. I really don't like Marquise Lee.
I
But,
don't either.
what
I mean,
about
I don't like Sammy Watkins, and I'm advocating for him in fantasy football at this point. So
right? What about now the names? What about Jarvis Landry? Kind of same sort of token, second round rookie.
yeah, and he's getting
He's
some.
actually getting some playing time.
Yeah, I've noticed him more on special teams, but he is definitely getting some offensive playing time. That's another guy. I think I like all these guys more than Richardson and Moncrief. Maybe not Marquise Lee. I do think maybe that's a little stretching it, but
Yeah.
and also if Lewis Murphy is somehow still available, not a young guy, but Tampa Bay's Lewis Murphy, if he's still out there, particularly with news that Vincent Jackson is kind of on the trading block. If he goes, then Murphy becomes a starter every week and a very high volume guy because the Bucks throw the ball a lot. So,
That's interesting.
and other than that in Tampa, there's really not anybody else like Mike Evans and Lewis Murphy. Robert Haran is not playing very well, and Russell Shepard would maybe be the next in line.
Gross.
Yeah, he's actually looked really good as a wide receiver, and I've been kind of hoping for like a QB catastrophe so that he gets thrown in as the emergency quarterback. But
Now that would be something to make Tampa exciting.
just run the Wildcat with him and Haran running jet sweeps and Doug Martin and Bobby Rainey beside him. Just and then he could throw up jump balls to Mike Evans every once in a while. But anyway, that's this is the fantasy game plan, not the how bad are the Bucks game plan. So. Let's move on, and we'll kind of combine making our lineup with talking about each position and just some matchups that we like this week. So we're going to make a lineup on FanDuel.com, which you may have heard of on your television every week that you've watched football because they have a commercial that plays all the time. We're going to enter the big $2 GPP, I believe they call it the Snap. Is that the Snap? I don't know. They call all the things like just NFL football words. So I think it's a Snap. So the difference is we did DraftKings last week. The big differences are DraftKings has a flex spot and FanDuel does not. And FanDuel has a kicker spot and DraftKings does not. So we will have to be picking a kicker, and I agree. I don't know if you guys can see Matt giving the thumbs down there. I'm not a big fan of the kicker either, but we got to do it. It's part of what we do. So we're gonna do it. So you picked first last week, or did I pick first?
I think you picked first, but since you don't want me to pick Kyle Orton, just go ahead and pick first.
Yeah, because I don't want you to pick Kyle Orton. I'm gonna go ahead and pick first, and it really kind of hurts me to say this. It really does. But we're gonna go with Teddy Bridgewater. On FanDuel, he is 5,400, which, to put that into perspective, you would pay more to put Matt Schaub in your lineup than you would Teddy Bridgewater.
Or Logan Thomas, or E.J. Manuel, or Johnny Manziel,
Manziel, or Josh McCown, or Jimmy Garoppolo,
Derek
or Michael.
Anderson.
Yeah, like he is priced below backups, and he is a starter going up against the worst defense in the NFL. At that price, all he has to do is throw for like 200 yards and run for 5 yards and not throw 7 interceptions, and he meets his value. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous how good of a value he is at that price. Like, you're talking about Kyle Orton. Kyle Orton is, fine or whatever. Kyle Orton is also nearly $2,000 more than Teddy Bridgewater. And roughly people say you want to get about 3 times the value in points. So like if it's 5,000, you want 15 points. you're basically getting like 6 points worth of value here, and I'm not going to project that Orton's going to do better than Bridgewater by that much, if at all. So, because this matchup is just so great for Bridgewater, both as a thrower and as a runner, because the Bucs just aren't a disciplined defense.
Yeah, that's a really good call. Honestly, I've only made one lineup so far this week just to kind of prepare for the show, and I probably got all the way down to the Chad Henne names, and I was like,
yeah, like you don't go down that far.
Yeah, right. Like I would never go down that far. Just started scrolling back. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, you get to Chad Henne, Brian Hoyer, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm not going down any further than that.
I mean, maybe we should fade Bridgewater and pick Michael Vick for a similar price.
Goodness gracious. All right, well, this week we'll switch it up a little bit, and we'll do a snake draft. So you can pick 2 here, and then I'll come around and pick 2, and then we'll go from there.
All right. So since we talked about stacking, I think it's only right that we stack this pick with Cordero Patterson.
Okay. I don't disagree, because he's also really cheap.
He's super cheap too. I mean, that one I managed to get that far.
Although I will say that when we're thinking about stacking with Teddy Bridgewater, and also just for year-long leagues this week, I like Jarris Wright a lot. He's never going to be lined up against Alteron Werner, and when Teddy has played, Wright has got between like 4 and 9 targets in every game. He's a guy that Teddy trusts, and they run screens for him. Like, they use him like they should be using Patterson. So I don't hate Patterson. I would prefer Wright just because you could probably get him on waivers in most leagues, and he's cheaper. But Patterson obviously has big play potential that Wright does not have, and so I don't disagree with this at all. He's only 6,000 on FanDuel, which is ridiculously cheap. So I totally agree with that pick.
Yeah. So.
And particularly in FanDuel, and this is another difference, it's only half-point PPR.
Yeah, that's
full PPR. So you want the big play guys. So that is Patterson defined. So.
Yeah, definitely. Even the biggest Cordero Patterson fanboy there is, I'm not crazy about him at this point in fantasy leagues, and even in daily leagues. I know he always has the big upside, and like I'll push that all the time. But even in GPPs, I've been kind of shying off lately. But I think if there's gonna be a week, it's got to be against this Bucs team.
Yep.
It would
a team with safeties that are a mess, a team with bad corners, a team that is undisciplined, a team that can't get after the quarterback very well, a team that doesn't tackle well.
Maybe if they just did that thing, where they handed him the ball too, like that normally produces.
Yeah, the Bucs have been vulnerable to that this season too. There have been a couple times where like end arounds and misdirections and stuff have gotten them off balance. So I totally agree. Make your second pick. We've got a ton of money since we've gone cheap on these first 2 spots.
I know, and even now I'm thinking of like the good values that were out
Do
there.
it. Give me a bunch of money. I'll take it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you know what? You probably should. Let me think here for my second pick. I'm actually not gonna go value, and I'm gonna go a little bit more. Well, actually, a lot bit more expensive here, and I'm gonna take some money. So I think we should probably go with Marshawn Lynch this week at running back. Get a pretty generally safe pick, even though they're not at Seattle. That Carolina defense is. We were just talking about the Bucs, how bad they are. Carolina is terrible too. I just tweeted a picture a little while ago. Get your act together, NFC South. Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and Carolina are allowing the most points per game. And Carolina in particular, I'm actually going to be finishing up after the podcast a tape piece on their defense for Black and Blue Review, and they're just a total mess too. And Lacey and Starks both scored a touchdown last week. I think Lynch could get in the end zone at least once, and a really good player like Lynch against a bad defense. I think that's a nice little safety valve for us in the tournament.
Yeah, I don't agree at all, or I don't disagree at all. I actually wrote a piece for numberfire.com that will go up soon as well about how bad the NFC South is. So
it's so bad.
And I mentioned that the defenses are the worst, and Carolina's is the best in the division, and it ranks seventh worst in number fires metrics, and that is the best one in the division. So it's bad. It's ugly in every way. I would maybe target more the passing game than the running game if I had to choose, but that also includes Lynch in the passing game because he is one of their featured receivers, just in the target distribution. So.
Hell, we could still throw a receiver from Seattle in there and probably still be safe. That's how
Yeah,
bad.
no, definitely. I mean, it's and it, I don't like I said, I don't disagree with Marshawn Lynch. He's always capable of scoring like 3 touchdowns. So, and the volume's definitely there. So I definitely I see where you're coming from with that pick. I will make 2 selections here, and the first one I'm going to go with is so as I said, we're on FanDuel, and that means that we are chasing big plays. We're chasing touchdowns. Really, are more important because there's not the same setup as DraftKings with bonuses and PPR and all that stuff. So I'm going to go with Terrence Williams, playing at home against the Washington. Williams has been a very heavy red zone target for the Cowboys this year. They've thrown the ball in the red zone like 15 or 16 times, and he has over half of the targets in the red zone. That's over Gavin Escobar and Des Bryant combined. Like, he's getting all of the looks when they're inside the 20, and it's paid off. Like, he's turned that into touchdowns. And so on a site where you're not really trying to chase volume quite as much, you're trying to chase touchdowns and big plays. I think that Terrence Williams is the guy. Obviously, Washington's defense is a mess in general, but you got to figure that they're going to be watching Dez like every other team does, and that should open some things up for Williams. And it's another cheaper play. With you adding Lynch in there, we do have to save some money in other spots, and I feel like that's a good mid-range guy at only 6,800. Just for general purposes, like obviously Dez is a great play this week. If you're in a deep league and you're hurting a tight end, Gavin Escobar is not a bad play. Tony Romo, if he's somehow, I know that there are people who have Tony Romo on the waiver wire in their leagues, and that's obviously shallow leagues, but you want to go get him this week. Like, this is a great matchup for them hosting Washington.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. I'm not a huge fan of Williams, but in a touchdown format.
Yeah, we're chasing a touchdown here, really, and
he does that.
Yeah, he does that. He gets the opportunities for that, and that's what we're looking for here. So, and then my other pick is going to be, let me find him on here. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Stall for time. Crap. Where did he? Am I scrolling down too far?
Let me ask you a question while you're looking.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, obviously we're probably not going to do this because we already have 2 other Vikings in our lineups, but what do you think about Jerick McKinnon this week? He's another one who's super, super cheap.
Well,
all these Vikings are super cheap.
They are really cheap. I will say that the Bucs' run defense is better than most people think, and I don't think that it is that great of a matchup to target him, particularly when the pass matchup for them is so good, and the Minnesota defense isn't that great. So this actually could kind of become a back and forth. I just think that the passing game is more involved. I actually think that in a weird way, Asiata becomes a nice play this week because I think that they may be throwing more, and even though McKinnon did get involved in the passing game this past week, Asiata is the more trusted guy when it comes to all the aspects of the passing game. So I don't hate McKinnon in season long. In DFS, I'm not going to touch him. I don't think he has upside. In season long, though, I would, if you picked up McKinnon and you need to start him this week, like if you're replacing Fred Jackson or Frank Gore or whoever this week, like I'm totally okay with starting him in season long. I just don't think he's a good DFS play because I think his upside is limited.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed with what I've seen from McKinnon. I think he could have a big week. I know you obviously know the Bucs better than I do as far as, and obviously their run defense is better than their pass defense, but that's It's not saying much.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Levante David's good enough to shut down some running games on his own on some weeks.
True.
So, and no, sorry, I did scroll down too far. I'm going back to the well with Lamar Miller again this week.
I was going to pick Lamar Miller. So that's good.
Playing at the Jacksonville Jaguars, so obviously on the road, so not great. But other than that, everything's perfect. He's still only 7,400 on FanDuel, and great matchup. Likely to score a touchdown. It's his show there in Miami, and it's a great matchup. So I think that's where we will go, and it's a little cheaper. Like it's still kind of expensive, but we do still have the kicker and defense spots, which will save us some money. We're currently sitting at 64.75 average per player, but like I said, once we pick a kicker and a defense, that will go down. So we will be able to keep spending on these last couple positions.
Yeah, certainly. I feel pretty good about the kicker and defense thing. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pick us a tight end, and this one's actually fairly easy for me, and I'm gonna go with Gronk against the Bears. I mean, whatever. I actually have been playing. I'll mention this now, but since we have some money to spend, I'm going with Gronk. But I'll mention that Owen Daniels is a pretty appealing option this week. Going back with him, he's someone and he's 5,500 on FanDuel. I'm pretty sure he's 41 on DraftKings. He's going to be in a lot of my lineups this week.
He is on the injury report specifically with a knee injury, so that is worth watching. But yeah, that's not like somebody's going to take his job over the course of the week though. So.
Right, exactly. Charles Clay's another one who's listed as questionable, but somebody that I like as well this week against the Jags.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at other tight ends, obviously in season long, I like Greg Olsen just because he's pretty much option number one in the Carolina offense.
He's the most expensive tight end here.
Yeah, on FanDuel, he's a little too expensive. I know that Seattle's not what they used to be, but that's still not a matchup I want to test for such a high-priced guy. If Martellus Bennett plays against New England, I like that, but obviously that's a risk. Delaney Walker against the Texans. He's kind of just been a stable guy all year, but probably the tight end I like the most is Zach Ertz against the Cardinals. Eventually, the Cardinals are going to remember that they're not good at covering tight ends, and I feel like that Ertz is a guy who can take advantage of that. So, and Ertz is really cheap on FanDuel as well. So if you are looking for a tight end on FanDuel, it's a little cheaper than Gronk, which I like Gronk. But if you want a cheaper than Gronk tight end, I feel like Ertz is maybe the way to go.
Yeah, another cheap guy that I like a lot in my lineups, and now we're kind of getting off track. Jordan Reed, 5,200 on FanDuel. I think he's around the same price on DraftKings, facing Dallas this week.
Yeah, which Dallas has been better on defense, but I agree that that's still a good enough matchup. Does it matter to you if RG3 or Colt McCoy plays?
I think it might help a little if McCoy plays because just a quick side note. I live in Fairfax, so I'm right near DC. I work with a lot of Washington fans, and they're always going back and forth with me about the quarterback position. 3 weeks ago it was Cousins was the greatest thing to ever hit, and one of my coworkers came up to me and started talking about the game, whatever. And he said, "Now, what do you think of it?" And I said, "Stop! Don't tell me why Colt McCoy is really good." And he's like, "But he looked." I was like, "No." And I just was like, I'm walking away from this conversation. I can't have this.
Okay.
But yeah, so I still think he's terrible. And he's got that little pop gun arm, too, which, will be nice for the shorter target in that offense, which is probably Jordan Reed. So, whatever. I think for a cheap price, you could throw him out there. But yeah, I'm going to go with Gronk.
Okay. And just to make it, just to be nice to me, go ahead and pick a kicker and/or.
I was gonna do that. I'm not a terrible person.
Well, I mean, you kind of are, but.
Okay, whatever. Anyways, so I'm going to go with kicker, and let me scroll all the way to the bottom here.
Yeah, there are no min-price kickers this week on FanDuel, which is weird. There are some that are just $100 more, but there are none that are literally just $4,500, which I find weird. But
yeah, I don't even like. I mean, I don't even look at kicker pricing all that heavily. It's just so crazy. I'm actually going to go. I'm going to go with the Chiefs kicker.
Cairo Santos.
Cairo Santos.
All
Maybe
right.
just because the name is exciting and he had that nice field goal last week. Whatever. Who cares? Move on.
All right. Well, we've got 1,400 left, and we have a defense and a wide receiver. So I'm going to be able to spend big on my wide receiver if I can find a cheaper defense that I like. But I don't need to go too cheap, and we can balance this out really nicely. So,
I have a suggestion for cheap defense, and this is, but you don't have to listen to me. But if you can let me speak, I have something to say.
yeah, go ahead.
So I was just talking about Dallas. I actually think their defense is a decent play against McCoy this week. They're at home. I don't like playing defenses that are on the road in general. I've been burned by that a lot of times, even when the defense is pretty good. So Dallas is at home playing Colt McCoy. They're 4,700 on FanDuel. They're a little pricier, in relative spectrum on DraftKings. But that's just a suggestion if you're looking cheap.
Yeah, I don't need to go quite that cheap though, because the most expensive wide receiver is only 8,800.
Right.
So,
Now, I'm just saying that for
general purposes, definitely.
for our people out there.
Yeah, for the peoples. I am actually going to go with the Houston Texans. They are not at home. I'm sorry, but they are playing at the Tennessee Titans this week, and I just feel like this is a game that is low scoring, first of all, and that some J.J. Watt long touchdown could come out of this game with a stable of running backs that's not really all that reliable, and quarterback play that is inconsistent at best from the Titans. That the Texans, obviously have the players to take advantage of that. Sacks and fumbles and things like that from Watt. I just feel like it's a good situation there, and really, like when I'm looking at defenses, a lot of times I'm just looking at which one's not going to kill me as much as anything else. And I feel like this is a situation where the Houston defense is not going to kill me. So, and with that, we've got 8,900 left and a wide receiver spot to fill. And basically, I have my choice between Jordy Nelson, Dez Bryant, and Antonio Brown. We already took Terrence Williams, so I'm not going to take Dez Bryant just because they both really can't do what I want them to do. Ideally, I'd like them to both catch multiple touchdowns, and that's unlikely. It's possible, but I don't want to take that bet. So it comes down to Brown and Nelson. I feel like Brown is more valuable in PPR format. Nelson is a better big play option, more likely to score a touchdown, even though Brown still scores a lot of touchdowns despite being smaller. So I'm going to go with Jordy Nelson to fill out our lineup. At New Orleans, great matchup. Antonio Brown facing Indianapolis is a little bit tougher, even though the Steelers are at home. I'd rather still go with the Packers in the dome at the Saints, which is a really good matchup for Nelson and the Green Bay offense.
Yeah, game's going to turn into a shootout, and I was glad you went with Nelson, and because I definitely think we want a piece of that.
So that makes our lineup: Teddy Bridgewater, Marshawn Lynch, Lamar Miller, Cordero Patterson, Terrence Williams, Jordy Nelson, Rob Gronkowski, Cairo Santos, and the Houston Texans defense. And once again, we will split whatever we win from this. It is a $2 entry. Top prize is $6,000. So if we each won $3,000, maybe we can pay someone to pick our DraftKings lineups for us. And that gives you some perspective on some of the different matchups going on this week that are worth keeping an eye on. Are there any other particular guys that stand out to you as good matchups this week, good plays either in DFS or in season long?
Well, we covered a lot of good ones.
Yes.
I do like we didn't take anyone from this game, I believe, but the Cardinals against the Eagles. I think there's a lot. Oh, we talked about Zach Ertz.
We talked about Zach Ertz.
Yeah.
Obviously on the Philadelphia or on the Arizona side, Carson Palmer, Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, Andre Ellington, all good picks this week.
Yeah, I stacked Palmer and Floyd last week in a few GPPs, and it didn't work. Well, no, I mean, it didn't work out like to an outrageous extent, but it was still pretty decent. I think you could probably do that this week. The Philadelphia defense has been better lately, but I still think they give up enough plays in the passing game that those two guys could get off. Other than that, when we mentioned targeting the NFC South defenses, that 9:30 a.m. start between the Lions and the Falcons, I think you can pretty safely play Golden Tate again.
Matt Stafford, Golden Tate, yeah.
That's going to be a good stack as long as Johnson's out against that.
Yeah,
defense.
and you're not going to find it on a lot of DFS slates, so
true. Yeah,
start at 1. But for season long, obviously, like if you've got those guys.
There's a few contests that are just the Thursday night game and then that 9:30 a.m. game, and I'm like, am I so sick that I can that I'm going to predict a Jeremy Ross touchdown or a Corey Fuller touchdown or whatever.
Another game I like looking for offense in the Chicago-New England game. We mentioned Gronk. I also like Vereen. Because I feel like this will be a competitive game, and that's when he plays the most. Obviously, more in a PPR league. Forte, I think, is a good play this week, as well as if Bennett doesn't play, obviously Marshall and Jeffrey are really solid plays, but you're going to start them anyway. Do you have any thought? Like, would you try to pick another wide receiver or tight end if Bennett doesn't play, or would you just roll with the big three there?
Oh, I mean, I'm just rolling with the big three. I mean, there's no one else really on that offense.
Yeah, I don't think that it's worth trying to chase.
Like Santonio Holmes or Josh Moore.
Well, is Marquess Wilson's not back yet, right?
No, I don't think so. I think he was on. Didn't he get put on IR Boomerang?
Yeah, which would be next week.
I think so.
Because Charles Sims is coming back next week too. Which, by the way, a lot of people have been talking about Charles Sims. I would totally be okay picking him up in a deeper benched league, and if it's PPR in particular, because the Bucs are throwing so much, and he is a better receiver than Bobby Rainey and Doug Martin. So
you mean Doug Martin's not going to finish his top 12 running back?
Shut up. Am I still right about Sean Green having more touchdowns than Cordero Patterson? I think I am, even though Sean Green sucks. So
no kidding.
So does Cordero Patterson, apparently. But we're starting him in our DFS lineup because that's what we do. One other game that I wanted to point out we didn't talk a ton about is Indianapolis versus Pittsburgh. I did mention that I didn't like Antonio Brown because that matchup's a little tougher, but not tough enough to scare me away. Particularly from Le'Veon Bell. He's cheap in DFS, so I don't mind him there. And then on the other side of the ball, obviously the Colts are all great plays this week against Pittsburgh, so I do like that. And St. Louis, Kansas City, we didn't talk a lot about that game. It didn't really come up. Jamal Charles, are you all back in on Jamal Charles? Start him everywhere. Don't worry about him situation yet.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was 6,700 on DraftKings last week. I wish I had played him more.
Yeah, I was all about him. He got that touchdown and had already almost met his value.
Right.
So that's why
so much smarter than me.
No, I didn't. I did awful on DraftKings. I think that's about it. I think we've pretty much covered virtually every game. Like, I don't think we've really talked about Oakland to Cleveland, but I think the point here is you probably don't want anybody in that game.
Well, actually, let me just. I'm just going to mention, I would actually not hate, if you're going to build a really strong lineup everywhere else, I wouldn't hate playing Darren McFadden in that game.
Yeah, no, Darren McFadden he's got a huge portion of their running attack.
It's his backfield, which is...
It's just that they don't run that much. So.
Right, yeah. I mean, and he scored last week. Cleveland's pretty bad against the run. So if you really, I mean, and I'm Ben Tate, same thing. He disappointed last week, but I'm fine going back to him.
Definitely, I'm right there with you.
So you can pick up those two running backs in that matchup. Maybe.
And if the other tight ends in Seattle continue to be out, then go ahead and throw some money on Cooper Helfett just because Matt doesn't know who he is.
I don't know who that person is.
I did notice that Gavin Escobar is like the 5th most expensive tight end on FanDuel. I don't think you should do that.
Yeah, and that made up Seattle tight end is pretty high up there
Yeah,
too,
he's like 12. Yeah.
which I guess should just show you the weird.
Although I think Luke Wilson is back, so I think that plan is actually out the window. And Luke Wilson's good. He just doesn't ever. There's no volume in that offense, so you can't
Now,
do it.
Luke Wilson, I know who that is. I know he is a person who exists and played in a few movies.
Yes. I did get another question. This wasn't maybe even for the podcast. I'll answer it off air as well. But BZW on Twitter asked me, how do you feel about picking up Ryan Matthews and stashing him? And my answer is I'm all for it, assuming you're not dropping somebody remotely useful. If you picked up Brandon Bolden or James White as a speculative play in the New England backfield, you can drop them for Ryan Matthews. If you've got a second quarterback that you picked up to get through bye weeks, you can drop him. But I wouldn't drop a Darren McFadden for Ryan Matthews. I wouldn't drop. I'm trying to think of other fringe guys, but Ryan Matthews is going to be out there in a lot of leagues, 10 and 12 team leagues. He's probably going to be on waiver wires, and Brendan Oliver's good, but they're going to spread the carries around in that backfield, and they're going to give them to Ryan Matthews over. Is it Ronnie Brown that they've got there? I'm not, whatever. And also, Ryan Matthews is actually a really good receiving back, probably better than Oliver, and without Woodhead, he's going to move into that role more. So I feel like he's going to be pretty productive through the air in a way that we haven't seen in a couple of years when he gets back. So that is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I liked Ryan Matthews a lot before the season, and he was playing pretty well. And he's a good player. He's in a contract here, right?
I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure he is. Him and CJ Spiller are both in contract years. I'm interested to see them both potentially on new teams, though. I think there's a pretty decent chance Matthews is back in Seattle. San Diego, whatever.
I think they'd be good on the same team. I think that would be a good 1-2 punch.
That would be really interesting. And because you mentioned that Matthews is and I'm not going to get too deep into evaluating players and all that type of stuff because nobody really cares what I think. But I really think Matthews has a lot of potential. Like you said, he's a good pass catcher. I think he'd get to do more than I think San Diego kind of lets him do.
Yeah. Well, and Norv let him catch passes, and Boy didn't. So.
Yeah. And they have Woodhead, so it's understandable. But yeah, I'm interested because Oliver's a pretty good receiver, and I think he's been really good. But so I'm interested to see the split there.
Yeah, I would hope that in some weird way Oliver becomes what Matthews was, and Matthews becomes what Woodhead was, because Woodhead was the better fantasy back because he got red zone carries and he got catches, and Matthews was actually just getting between the 20s work, which was good for real football but not good for fantasy. And I'm hoping that that's kind of the reverse now that Matthews is back and all the other backs are hurt.
Yeah, that would be really interesting.
But if not, if Matthews just goes back to having between the 20s work, he's still useful because he'll get volume, but his upside is limited if he continues to kind of play between the 20s like he did before. It's not a bad situation, but it is something to monitor. And I guess the only other question I have is, because I'm apparently so biased that I can't answer this question correct or fairly, do you like Mike Glennon this week against the Minnesota Vikings?
Sure.
See, that's exactly the response.
I guess.
You just gotta shrug.
He throws a lot.
Tell me some. Let's end on a good note instead of talking about Mike Glennon. Tell me good things about Ty Sambrailo. Is that his name?
Ty Sambrailo?
Yeah.
I guess that's how you pronounce it. I
don't
know. I never listened to any of their games broadcasted, so.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, no. Sambrailo is a really interesting tackle prospect. I just wrote a little short article about him on Optimum Scouting because they're my conference for that particular scouting firm that I work for. And Sambrailo is interesting because he's pretty nimble-footed. He's athletic. He can get out of space and everything, but he's also a badass, which is nice. You see some people really fall in love with the nimble tackles, and I don't know a ton about all the offensive line prospects right now for the upcoming draft, but some people like Cedric Ogbuehi out there from Texas A&M because he's really nimble, and everybody wants those guys to be Orlando Pace or whatever, like the big dancing bear, but that's not always the case because those guys are sometimes really soft, and that's what some people who know more than me say that is what the way he is. He doesn't play with that punch and aggression. Sam Braylo does that. He's a really, like I said, he's a badass. Like he wants to get down the field and knock somebody around. And the good thing about him too is like I think he can fit in a zone blocking scheme. I think he can fit in a power man scheme. And like at worst, I think you could maybe he could start, but at worst, I think he's like a really good utility backup that can start out at tackle or inside at guard. So he's a guy that I'm really, really excited about because, I cover the Mountain West, so it's not like they're just bleeding draft prospects every.
Well, but you get to cover Garrett Grayson, who's going to be the greatest quarterback of all time. So
I'll have you know that I just sent in my notes for this month, and I was like, right now in our rankings, I think he's slotted in as like a UDFA, and I was like, I think we ought to put him at least like in a seventh round consideration.
Absolutely, he's going to get drafted. He's going to have a Tom Savage like rise up the charts.
Oh, gross! Don't put that on him. But hey, I never thought we'd get to do a little tackle talk here on the Fantasy Game Plan podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thing, since it's the Fantasy Game Plan and the football's only in the logo, I will give you guys a quick golf pick. If you're playing golf on DraftKings, Hudson Swafford is a guy I really like this week. I've fiddled with some statistics and metrics, and he showed up really positively in all of them. His odds to win to salary ratio is really good. So if you're going to play DFS golf and you want a guy who's a little cheaper, go with Hudson Swafford. I don't know anything else about him except that he putts well. He putts well. He drives well. He approaches well, and Vegas likes him. So that works for me.
That's what you get when you make it to the end of the Fantasy Game Plan podcast. You get to hear about
Colorado State
potential second day offensive tackles and golf.
The DFS golf is really fun though. Like I'm surprised at how fun it is. And we meant to talk more about Victiv last week, and we didn't. And we didn't talk about it again this week. We will eventually, maybe do some stuff on Victiv later. But they actually just pushed a big update live, and now a lot of their features that were previously not running yet are up and running. So definitely go check them out. And so if you're at the end of the podcast and you haven't ever been to these sites before, we set up our lineup on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. We also talk about DraftKings a lot, and that's at DraftKings.com. And Victiv, VICTIV.com, is another good daily fantasy site that you should check out if you have not already done so, because it's a really different NFL and NHL daily fantasy site with different pricing. Like you can kind of, if you don't like the pricing on the two other sites that you go to normally, which are the two big ones, the FanDuel and DraftKings, just go to Victiv and you'll probably see something totally different. So
I got paid this week, so I think I'm going to try it out.
Okay. I'll give you. I'm not gonna post my referral link on Twitter because I'm a good person, but I may send you mine. So, but anyway,
I'm not gonna use it because I'm a bad person.
You are. That'll do it for this week's episode of Fantasy Game Plan Hangout. A quick update on kind of where we're going with this. I actually am going to be posting these episodes along with some occasional fantasy football thoughts on a new blog hosted by Sports Blog, and I will be posting that on Twitter, and we'll be just posting these every week along with just some occasional, writing nonsense on strategy for fantasy football. But I'll get the link and all that information to you guys once that's all set up, and that'll be your place to, you can go and ask comments there in the comments section, or ask questions in the comments section and things like that. So that'll be where you can find these, but you can also find me on Twitter at LeoHowell8. You can find me at numberfire.com. You can find me at rotogrinders.com doing twice weekly tape review breakdowns, and at bucksnation.com for now, but that's going to end here pretty soon because I'm not going to write about the Bucks anymore. And then for Matt, you can find Matt on Twitter at
Matt Harmon, BYB. I'll have you know I do this on the Sunday morning show that I host now too. All thanks to you. I do that little lower third thing.
Yeah, you got a point because I mean it's right there. Like that's why you do it. Like it's if you had a green screen behind you, you would show stuff on it.
Hey man, I hear you. But yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Matt Harmon _BYB. Football guys, Optimum Scouting, Sportable, Black and Blue Review. You
Hot
can find
takes
me
and hot cakes.
hashtag hot takes and hot cakes every Sunday morning. It's a lot of fun, and Dan and I get to go over some matchups. We answer a ton of questions because that's when people really have questions. Is Sunday morning, so we actually
Yeah.
get we
As
actually
it
get
turns out, Wednesday night's not really a hotbed for questions.
apparently not, but yeah. So people flood us with questions, which is pretty surprising. The show's actually doing pretty well, and we have TJ Hernandez on to talk daily. So if you like these daily segments, you're listening, maybe check us out on Sunday morning. It's a lot of fun. We get a lot going on those Sunday morning shows. It's going to be interesting with the 9:30 a.m. start. I haven't really thought of how we're going to do that because I'm definitely not getting up at 7:30 to do the show. So we'll see about that. Whatever. That's not your problem. That's nobody's problem. But yeah, so you can check me out. I've actually got an article going up on Sporting News today about Kevin White, or not today, maybe tomorrow. We get to do that through Optimum Scouting. It's about Kevin White, who's a college receiver, senior at West Virginia. So if you're super into Dynasty or Devy leagues, I mean, you have to be a sicko to be listening to this podcast. So you're probably interested in these upcoming guys. So hey, check that out.
Is Kevin White taller than 6'2"?
He is listed at 6'3". So
Okay, so I like it.
6'3" and 213 something pounds. I mean, like it's an easy comparison to make that he looks like Larry Fitzgerald with the dreads and the numbers, but I mean it's really similar. I highlight some good pieces in the some good clips in the piece. So
Because last week I was told by a college football daily fantasy sports analyst that I should start some guy named Braverman for West Virginia, not West Virginia, for Western Michigan, who weighed like 150 pounds and was 5'8", and he didn't do anything for me. So I'm done trusting any short receiver at all, except for Antonio Brown in any sport. So
there's some little child on Boise State, Shane Williams Rhodes, who's like 5'5" and 155 pounds, maybe something like that.
Man, I hope these guys wind up in San Diego and take Eddie Royal's job and just score touchdowns and make us all mad, just so that we can perpetuate the cycle forever and ever. But anyway, that'll do it for this week's episode of Fantasy Game Plan Hangout. Keep an eye on Twitter, and we will update you on where you can find the podcast in the future. We'll still do Hangouts; it'll still be on Twitter and stuff, but we will be posting them on the internet, and I'll probably be able to like host them when the show starts, so you can go to that page and go into the comments to ask questions as well and things like that. So there will be more ways to interact and keep up with the show. But that'll do it for this week. Feel free to reach out to us on Twitter if you have any questions for this week or for next week's show. If you have any suggestions for topics you want us to cover, things like that, we would be more than happy to do so. And tell us what you think of our DFS lineup. We'll be posting it on Twitter, and you can make fun of it all you want, or tell us how great it is. But you probably won't do that. So thanks for joining us, guys, and have a good day.